Okay, thank you. Well, as you know, today's presentation is about the first post. Is the translation coming through? I said, is the translation coming through?
It is.
Okay, thank you. Right, today's presentation is about the first postage due or deficit issues of Peru. And this is essentially one stamp issue that was in service from 1874 to 1909, or for 35 years. This is an extraordinarily long time for a single issue. And as a result, it underwent many changes. Peru was only the 8th postal administration in the world and the first in all of the Americas to issue postage due stamps. They were originally printed by the National Banknote Company of New York. However, the National Banknote Company merged or was acquired by the American Banknote Company in early 1879, and the American Banknote Company inherited the dies and plates that the National Banknote Company had produced. So, why did Peru want postage due stamps? During the 1870s, Peru was experiencing tremendous economic growth, and as a result, mail volume was rapidly increasing. Between 1871 and 1873, mail, both domestic and foreign, increased from 1,660,000 to 2,575,000 items, or 55%. However, the deficiencies collected decreased 38% from 16,000 sols to 10,000 soles. Peru collected deficiency on short-pay domestic mail, but they also assessed local postage on incoming foreign mail, which likely comprised most of the deficiencies that were to have been collected. Mail arriving from Europe and the United States and other foreign countries was subject to 10 centavos local postage per 15 grams. Now, I think first I'm going to start with a brief history of the stamps themselves, and then I'll follow that up with a summary of the various usages you can find for these stamps. Okay, the contract with the National Banknote Company. In late 1991, Bill Welch, then the editor of the American Philatelist, was writing an article on the current American Banknote Company auction of their archives. He was given a copy of the original contract that was dated December 13th, 1873. The contract was evidently negotiated before actual proofs of the new stamps were produced, because it included a pencil sketch of the design, as well as a number of requirements to be fulfilled by the National Banknote Company. The sketch had 3 elements on it. It had the image of the SS Adriatic. It had the words deficit or franqueo, which implies that the stamp may have been intended for use other than to collect deficient postage. And it had an image of a llama, a traditional Peruvian image found in the Peruvian coat of arms and previously used in stamps produced for Peru by the American Banknote Company back in 1866. There were 4 values to be issued: 5, 10, 20, and 50 centavos. Stamp delivery was expected in 105 days, which should be about March 28, 1874. The actual stamp size was yet to be determined and was left the responsibility of the National Banknote Company. The stamps were to be slightly punched, which refers to the grills that were to be applied by the National Banknote Company. And the total contract cost was 236.60 British pounds. So the SS Adriatic, that was a stock image that the National Banknote Company had been using for a number of years. The ship, the SS Adriatic, had set a transatlantic speed record in crossing back in 1857. It had appeared on a banknote from the Citizens Bank of Louisiana, It has also been used as the logo for the Adriatic Insurance Company. And most importantly, it was used on the 12-cent stamp issued by the United States in 1869. This is a copy of the National Banknote Company's record book, order book, where they recorded all of their orders. And I'm going to blow this up a little bit. Oops. I'm going to blow this up a little bit. So you can see that it's January of 1874 was the date the order was entered. It refers to a December 1873 contract. The cost of engraving there's 4 different plates, and the cost of engraving is 40 pounds per plate, or $160. There were to be 11,400 impressions. These were plates of 100 stamps each. And so the 11,400 impressions would produce a total of 1,140,000 stamps at a cost of £7 per 100 impressions, or $79. The stamps were to be perforated, gummed, and embossed. And embossing refers to the grills. Now, if you go back to on the other side of the page is the shipping data, and most of the stamps were shipped on February 27th by Wells Fargo on the steamship Acapulco to Panama. So they should have arrived in Lima by the 1st of March. And the balance of the 5 centavo stamps were shipped on March 5th from the city of Guatemala. And these are the 4 stamps and the various quantities that were initially printed. In addition, the 50 centavo was reprinted in 1879 for 100,000 copies. And I will speak more to that in a later slide. And these are the grills. Peru was the only country besides the United States to emboss grills in their stamps. When the grills are applied, they would break the paper of the stamp. This made it harder to erase cancels, whose ink would have soaked into the paper of a grilled stamp. Peru also ordered definitive stamps from the National Banknote Company. Applying grills on definitive stamps makes sense to prevent reuse. It only makes sense in postage due stamps if they were also intended to be used as postage in some situations. And this reinforces the reasons for adding the word franqueo to the stamps. These stamps were of a different size than any of the US stamps, so a new grill had to be prepared. And the grills on these stamps measure 11 to 12 by 18 points, or 9.5 by 14 millimeters, slightly larger than the F grill used in some US stamps. Now, we also have 2 different essays, a 20 centavo and a 40 centavo essay. These essays look somewhat similar to the definitive stamps that were also issued in 1874. But they only contain the word deficit, not franqueo. And it's my belief that these essays were prepared before the contract was actually signed. Peru did not like the essays, and so that's the reason they included a pencil sketch of a stamp issue of a stamp design that they most preferred. Then in 1879, the American Banknote Company produced a 1 centavo postage due stamp. This was shortly after the merger with the National Banknote Company. These stamps were also grilled, and the grill measures 13 by 15 points, or 10 by 12 millimeters. Peru joined the UPU on June 15, 1879, and this lower denomination was needed to assess fractional fees on underpaid foreign mail. Although we haven't seen the contract or the order book for these stamps, the 1 centavo stamp, we do have a copy of the letter that from Peru requested these stamps. The letter is dated February 19th, 1879. And it was also addressed to the National Banknote Company because I think Peru was unaware of the pending merger. It also includes a pencil sketch of the proposed stamp. And the contract says the size of the new stamp is to be 3/4 of that of the previous postage due stamps. The image of the stamp is to be the Peruvian coat of arms. The legend is to contain the word deficit, but not franqueo. And the cost of engraving one plate of 100 stamps is $200 US on this contract, not British pounds. And the cost of 1,000 impressions is $400. So the total contract is $600. Now, die and plate proofs exist for all of these stamps. This is on this slide is a plate proof that was done it was done by the National Banknote Company, and it was approved on February 13th, 1874. I'll blow that up a little bit. And with a notation that the color should be a little lighter than what's shown on the proof. There are also plate proofs on India paper and on card for both of these, for all these issues. And there are also some die proofs and plate proofs of a 2 centavos design. We don't really know much about this, but I would speculate that when Peru wanted to place an order for the smaller denomination stamp, this was the official, was what the American Banknote Company proposed first, which was that used the existing design and just we changed the denomination to 2. Peru, once again, did not like this, so they wrote a letter requesting the new design and attached the pencil sketch that we saw a few slides ago. Okay, now and then in October of 1879, Peru sent another letter. I'm going to blow this up too a little bit. This letter is from, it's from the director of the post office. I think it's Francisco Munoz. And this letter says that they have run out of the initial order of the 50 centavo stamps, and so they want 100,000 more copies of the 50 centavo stamp produced as soon as possible. Okay, now a little bit of a historic background before we go further. Of course, May 5th is, as I said earlier, these stamps should have arrived in Lima by 1st of March. May 5th, 1874 is the earliest reported usage. But in April of 1879, Chile and Peru go to war. A couple months later, Peru joins the UPU on June 15th, 1879. On December of 1879, because of the war, Peru experiences inflation and requires stamps on foreign mail to be paid in silver. Chile occupies Lima and most of the coastal cities in Peru in January of 1881. In December 1881, Chile takes control of the postal operations in cities under its control. A peace treaty is negotiated in October of 1883, and Peru shortly thereafter regains control of all their post offices, but then civil war erupts in Peru. The Civil War ends in December of 1885, and a new government is installed in 1886. And then in January 1896, Peru devalues its currency, doubling the cost of foreign letters and simultaneously reducing domestic mail costs by 50%. And you'll see all of these historical events resulted in some changes to the stamps themselves or how Peru collected deficient postage. The first change, of course, was the creation of this overprint, the UPU Plata Lima overprint. When Peru was experiencing inflation in January 1881, or in 1870, and after the start of the war, they produced a UPU Plata Peru overprint. They didn't overprint the postage due stamps, but then after Chile occupied the coastal areas of Peru, the postmaster in Lima decided to issue a slightly different overprint with the word Lima in place of the word Peru, and they applied this overprint to the postage due stamps as well as to the definitive stamps. These overprints were applied one stamp at a time from a single hand stamp. We don't know how many they made, but we do know that there are only 2 reported covers that show this stamp, a stamp with this overprint used as a postage due. In October of 1881, a Lima Correos cancel without the date slug was used as an overprint on the postage due stamps, evidently for the purpose of using the postage due stamps as regular postage. They were only used between October 20th of 1881 and December 3rd, when Chile took control of the postal operations. Once again, the quantity of overprinted stamps is unknown, and there are no known covers with these stamps. There are, however, several canceled stamps that appear to be legitimate usages. But the vast number of these stamps are generally forgeries. Circular date cancel on the stamp on the right is dated November 26, 1881, which was during this period of usage. Then when Peru regained the control of their post offices following the war in November of 1883, they produced a series of triangle overprints that were applied to all stamps that remained in the post office, and would validated that those stamps had not been removed from the post office. So there are 11 different varieties of these triangles. These were applied to, not all of them were applied to every postage due stamp, but most of them were, and they were also applied to some of the stamps that still had the UPU Plata Lima overprint. And then after the war, with Chile ended in October 1883, some Chilean troops remained in Peru, principally at Mollendo and Arequipa. A small number of postage due stamps with triangle overprints and an added small Franca overprint were given to these troops for use on mail within Peru. Some of the postage due stamps also had the UPU Plata Lima overprint on them too. These stamps were used only in the first 6 months of 1884, and again, the quantities are unknown. But there are 11 surviving covers with these, used with these stamps. In 1896, Peru again ran low on the 50 centavo postage due stamp. To remedy the situation, they applied a diagonal overprint to some of the high value definitive stamps that they had. The Lecoq machine that was originally purchased in 1862 to print these stamps, to print stamps for Peru, was employed to apply this overprint. This machine was originally designed to print stamp images on a single strip of paper, For this overprint, this deficit overprint, it was reconfigured to allow the entire sheet of stamps to be placed under the printing mechanism. The overprints were still applied one stamp at a time, and the sheet must have been shifted below the printing mechanism to effect this. All the overprints are identical, but the vertical and horizontal spacing between overprints on adjacent stamps varies due to the inexact method of positioning the sheet of stamps. And this also results in errors with double overprints on one stamp, but not the adjacent stamp, or a missing overprint on an adjacent stamp. You can imagine how repetitive this must have been to move a sheet of stamps one stamp at a time under the machine, and then probably with a foot pedal apply the printing mechanism. After you do 10 or 20,000 of these, you might go just a little, you might just lose a little focus. There were 40,000 copies of the 50 centavos was overprinted, and 50,000 copies of the 1 sol. In 1897, then, the next year, I think that's a misprint, the deficit overprint was applied to all remaining copies of the 1, 5, 10, and 20 centavo postage due stamps. These were also applied by the Lecoq machine, and we don't know how many. Once again, we don't know the quantities of these overprints. In 1897, Peru also applied a diagonal Franqueo overprint to 30,000 copies of the 1 centavo issue. This was ostensibly done because of a shortage of low-value definitive stamps. However, half of the 30,000 copies was purchased by a stamp dealer, Williams and Company, which makes me think that this was really done as a favor to them so they could sell the stamps. These overprints were also applied by the Lecoq machine. Then in 1898, Peru ordered some very high value deficit stamps from the American Banknote Company. So 5 centavo, 5 soles and 10 soles. Now there is no legitimate need for these stamps. They printed 50,000 of each value. There was no real usage for these stamps, and there are no surviving copies. In fact, most of these stamps were never sold. Very few were sold. I think records indicated that only 539 copies of the 50 sol value and 1,200 copies of the 10 sol were actually sold. Most of the rest were auctioned off to collectors or overprinted for other usages. Then in 1902, Peru began to experience a shortage of low-value postage due stamps. So I should also have mentioned that when Peru ordered the high-value deficit stamps, they also ordered some high-value definitive stamps too. The 10 sol high-value postage due stamp is overprinted with the deficit un centavo overprint, and the 10 sol definitive stamp is overprinted with the deficit 5 centavos. Respectively, 49,800 and 48,800 were overprinted. Once again, very few of these were ever used, and there are no surviving covers. Then they also, at the same time, overprinted the 20 centavo postage due stamp with a deficit un centavo overprint. Once again, we don't know the quantities that were overprinted, but there are 6 surviving covers with these stamps on them. And they also overprinted, they put a deficit 5 centavos overprint on the 20 centavo postage due. Once again, no quantities known, but there are 2 surviving covers. So in 1902, then, to remedy the situation of the lack of postage due stamps, Peru ordered 100,000 copies of the 1 centavo and 150,000 copies of the 5 centavo postage due stamp that was originally issued in 1874 or in 1879. They used the same plates that were prepared almost 30 years earlier. They printed them in the same colors, but they didn't apply the grills to them. And there is one sheet of 100 stamps from the American Banknote Company archives with a specimen overprint. That specimen overprint measures 1.6 by 14 millimeters and without serifs. In 1904, they ordered 100,000 copies of the 10 centavo. Once again, from the same plates to the same color, specimen with a slightly different specimen overprint on the sheet, on the one sheet of stamps that was retained by the American Banknote Company. And then in 1907, Peru sent this letter. And in this letter, they decided they would order all 5 issues, 1, 5, 10, 20, and 50. But when they attached an example of the 50, they used the example they attached was not the original stamp from 1874. It was the stamp that they had, it was the definitive stamp that they had overprinted with the word deficit back in 1896. This created some confusion because the American Banknote Company still had the existing 1874 plate for the 50 centavo stamp. So they exchanged, a couple of telegrams went back and forth saying, do you really want this stamp? Or do you want the original 50 centavo stamp? And Peru said, no, they really wanted this stamp with the deficit overprint on it. Well, the American Banknote Company had both plates. They had the 50 centavo postage due plate, and they also had the 50 centavo definitive plate, but they didn't have a deficit overprint. So they photographically reproduced the deficit overprint on this sample stamp and created the new plate with 100 subjects with the word deficit. So when they printed the 10,000, there's only 10,000 copies ordered of this stamp. So they printed the stamp using the definitive plate, and then they used the new plate with the word deficit on it to overprint the word deficit. And these stamps have there's also there's specimen copies of these stamps too, with a slightly different specimen, 1.9 by 14 millimeters. Okay, then those stamps were actually shipped in late 1907. In 1908, Peru decided that they wanted to completely revise all of their stamp issues. So they ordered new definitive, new official, and new postage due stamps from the American Banknote Company. And all the existing stamps were withdrawn from circulation on March 4th, 1909. And if you look at the quantities of excess stamps that were auctioned, most of these quantities exceed the 1907 order. But very few of the 1907 stamps are actually used. For example, the 50 centavo with the deficit overprint, they only ordered 10,000, but at the end of when these were withdrawn from circulation, they still had 12,500 left, which includes the 10,000 they ordered in 1907 and the 2,500 that were left over from the overprinting that was done in 1896. So I'm not sure any of these stamps were ever used. The latest usage of these stamps was 2 years later, and I have a letter from, an unfranked letter from Eaton to Paita with a receipt cancel of March 10th, 1911, and it's the penalty is assessed with a bisected 20 centavo stamp. Okay, now I would like to talk about the covers. I have a census that I've been keeping for the last 15 years, and right now the census has 449 covers that span this 35-year period. And I've broken these covers into 7 categories: pre-UPU incoming foreign mail, penalty for reuse of stamps, official mail, judicial covers, foreign short paid mail, domestic short paid mail, and used as postage. And the first category is pre-UPU usages. Peru joined the UPU again on June 15th, 1879. So this period lasted only a little over 5 years out of the 35 years, or from May of 1874 until June of 1879. But there were 121 covers that I've recorded. And most of these covers are commercial mail, which probably explains why they survived. Most of them came from Great Britain, the United States, and France. There are a smattering of other countries: Cuba, Italy, Spain, Canada, Sweden, Turkey, and Uruguay. And they represent 27% of all the covers in the census. The thing that you will note is that the stamps are generally uncanceled from May of 1874 until the summer of 1875. This letter on this slide is from May of 1875 from London to Lima, and you can see that the postage due stamp is clearly uncanceled. This is the only registered cover from this period. The postage rate it's from Great Britain to Lima. Postage rate is 1 shilling 6 pence. And Great Britain had a 4 pence registration charge at this time for local registration. So the cover is correctly assessed. It's 1 shilling 10 pence. It was assessed 10 centavos for local postage and 30 centavos for local registration, which was the registration fee within Peru at this time. This cover is from Cuba. The ones from Cuba are probably the nicest looking covers. They're almost all from the same correspondence file. This cover was carried by a French packet to Peru, French post office in Cuba. You can also find these covers that were carried by British packet via British post office, and there's 1 or 2 that were carried that went to the United States before they were shipped to Peru. And this is one with the British that shows the British package. So from the same correspondence, it was shipped through the British post office and on British packet. And of course, there is 1 cover from Sweden that I saw in an auction catalog. I don't have this cover. And it's February 18th, 1875. It's 2 Cayo, and it is canceled because Cayo for some reason, Cayo was canceling these stamps 6 months before Lima started canceling them. That doesn't make a lot of sense. since they came to the port in Callao first. And this one is from Turkey, from the French post office at Smyrna in 1878. And then there are some covers from Italy that just actually came on the market a few years ago. This one is from San Margarita, Italy to Tacna, Peru. It's dated February 11th, 1875, and it is not canceled. The postage due stamp is not canceled. And this is the only postcard in this period. It's an 1879 postcard from Uruguay. Peru had joined the UPU by then, but Uruguay had not. And Peru and Uruguay did not have a separate postal treaty, like Peru did with Ecuador and Bolivia and Chile. And so they assessed local postage. There was no postcard rate at the time, so they assessed local postage just like this was a letter. So it was affixed with a 10 centavo postage due stamp. And then this is a cover from Henry Marquez collection. This is the only piece of printed matter during this time. It's an 1876 French journal. It was assessed 60 centavos postage due. So the item probably weighed between 75 and 90 grams. Once again, there was no printed matter rate, so they just assessed it based on the total weight of the journal. The next category is the penalty for reuse of stamps. There are 21 covers in this category, or 5% of the census. The 1866 Reglamento states that the penalty for the reuse of stamps is twice the normal postage. Now, if we think about that, if a letter was completely unpaid, then the penalty would be twice the postage rate. And it doesn't make sense for them to treat a letter that had a reuse stamp on it and apply the postage like it was an unused, that it had no stamp on it. So I think this regulation says it'll be twice the penalty for an unpaid letter or 4 times that of a paid letter. And that's exactly what we see. If you look up here, you see what is a partial Stampia Civita cancel and the outline of where the stamp was. So we don't know what reused stamp they applied to it, but it's clearly it was a reused stamp, because this is what the cancel would look like, a Stampia Civita. And it is clearly, it's got a 40 centavos penalty marking on it. And then for some reason, they put a 20 centavos penalty marking on top of each of the 2 20 centavo stamps to assess the 40 centavos total penalty. And this is a cover. This is actually from Guillermo Yosa's collection. This is the only other cover with this Stampia Civita marking on it. This is in 1876, the penalty was increased from 4 times to 10 times the value of a reused stamp. So this is a letter from Lima to Concepcion. It has the same Stampia Civita hand stamp that was used in the previous cover, and now it has 100 centavos penalty applied by applying 2 50 centavo stamps. But this is the circular cancel, Stampia Usata, is the cancel you see most on these covers. 80% of them have the Stampia Usata cancel on it. The other thing I should note is that I believe the regulations state that if a postmaster discovered a reused stamp on a cover, they were to send that cover to Lima, even though it may not needed to have gone to Lima to reach its destination. So the post office in Lima could review the stamp and the usage. And I believe all of these cancels were applied in Lima as a result. And there's also a single example of a straight line Stampia Usata cancel back in on this 1886 cover. And whoops. And a single example of a Stampia Savita straight line cancel on this 1894 cover. Now you might think that since most of the penalties were applied with two 50 centavo stamps that the 50 centavo stamps were used primarily for this purpose, but I don't think so. Official mail. Official mail is another conundrum, so to speak. There are 33 surviving covers, or 7% of the total census. Prior to the introduction of postage due stamps, an official mail would contain the hand stamp of the government office that was sending the letter, and the words Servicio Nacional, or an abbreviation SN. So this would be a typical official letter prior to the introduction of postage due stamps. But what we have is of the 33 surviving covers, 30 of them come from this one collection. They're all sent to the fiscal cashier of the Department of Huancavelica. They were all sent between May of 1874 and September of 1876. And the stamps were applied to the reverse of the cover. These were large covers, so this is not a penalty. The 20 centavo stamp is not a penalty. It's just the correct postage for a heavy cover. And this is another cover with 30 centavos on it. There was no 15 centavo rate, so this can't be a penalty. It just has to be a cover that raised 3 times, or between 30 and 45 grams. But there are 3 other covers that do not come from this hoard. This is one of them. This was sent from the government of the Isles of Guanape to Trujillo, to a court in Trujillo. It's got the Servicio stamp on it. It's got the hand stamp of the department. It looks to be an official cover, even though it's sent to a court. And it's a fairly large cover. So so 20 centavos postage rate makes some sense. So we're not sure exactly what happened. We're not sure if they switched to using postage due stamps on official mail for a few years and then dropped this practice after the war with Chile started in 1879, or if these covers are just anomalies. The next subject is judicial covers. Judicial covers exist before stamps were introduced. When stamps were introduced in 1858, they immediately started using stamps on judicial covers. Most of the judicial covers contain a statement. And the statement generally says, this cover or this wrapper contains legal documents involving a lawsuit between party 1 and party 2. They name the party usually, with postage to be paid by the receiving party. These documents were sent from one court to another court. I believe the stamps were actually applied by the court notary and not by the post office, but it's possible that the court notary took the covers, prepared the cover, took them to the post office, and the post office applied the stamps. So this is a typical judicial cover. There are 50 surviving covers in the census, or 11% of the total. This is not a very heavy cover, since it's only paying 3 times the normal postage rate. This is a typical statement on the back. I can blow it up. You might be able to read it. Contains, my Spanish is not that good, so I won't even try to translate this. But I believe this is the signature of the court notary who wrote the statement on the cover, prepared the cover, and this might be the signature of one of the receivers. I believe when the judicial cover arrived at its destination, the person who was supposed to pay for the postage would come to the court, pick up the enclosed documents. The court then would retain the wrapper, and the recipient would pay the postage at that time. There was never a penalty associated with these covers. Now, these covers were very heavy. This one is franked with 3 soles, 10 centavos, or 31 times the basic postage rate. It has 4 50 centavo postage dues, 10 20 centavos, and 1 10 centavo. And I believe this is why the 50 centavo value was so utilized. It was used on these heavy covers. This is probably the heaviest cover. Its postage is 7 soles, 80 centavos, 78 times the normal postage rate. So this one would have weighed 1.17 kilograms, or 2.6 pounds. And once the cover got to be above 1 kilogram, it required a cloth wrapper. So this is actually on cloth. And this is the reverse. Interesting enough, there are some bisected postage due stamps on this cover, which would indicate that some of these stamps have been bisected in advance of usage for some reason. And there's only one 50 centavo postage due stamp on this cover. So even though this cover is dated, cover is dated in 1888, it already appears that there was a shortage of 50 cent high value postage due stamps. Okay, the next category is foreign short paid mail. 63 surviving covers, or 14% of the total. And this excludes the covers that were sent to Peru before Peru joined the UPU. When Peru joined the UPU in 1879, their currency, 1 centavo is equal to 5 centimes. And that stayed in effect until 1896. After February 9th of 1896, the currency was devalued, which doubled the postage for foreign letters from 11 centavos to 22 centavos. And the new conversion rate was 1 centavo to 2.5 centimes. This is the earliest short paid foreign letter after Peru joined the UPU. It is dated, it was sent on June 23rd, 1879 from England. The rate to Peru, the rate to Peru was 4 pence, not 2.5 pence. Great Britain's rate to Europe and the United States was 2.5 pence. their UPU rate, but the rate to Peru is 4 pence. So this thing is only frank with 2.5 pence. So it was 4 pence short, or 15 centimes. So we have a T marking on this cover, which was typical, which was required by the UPU, and we have the single deficiency of 15 marked on it. Peru marked the 30 centavo or 30 centimes double efficiency. But since this is so early after Peru joined the UPU, they miscalculated the assessment. They assessed a penalty of 30 centavos or 1 centavo per centime. It should have been charged 6 centavos at 5 centimes per centavo. This is a 1895 double rate letter from the United States. It's franked with 5 cents, which was the United States UPU postage rate. It received a T mark in New York. I'll blow that up, I guess, which says T, there's a 2, which indicates it was a double rate cover, and the single deficiency was 25 centimes. So it was assessed a double deficiency of 50 centimes, which was equal to 10 centavos at 5 centimes per centavo. This one is a 1904 single rate letter. Should have been from the United States to Peru. It should have been franked with 5 cents. It's on a 2-cent stamped envelope. So it received a 50, so it's 15 centimes short, the single deficiency of 15 centimes. However, Peru only assessed 6 centavos. Now this was after they devalued their currency. So this is the double deficiency of the efficiency of 15 centimes. The double deficiency is 30. Since they only assessed 6 centavos, they're still using the old conversion of 5 centimes per centavo, 8 years after the devaluation. And this is interesting, is because there are not a lot of covers in the census during this time period, but they are a mixture of 5 centimes per centavo or 2.5 centimes per centavo. It seems that there was quite a bit of confusion about how to assess penalties after Peru devalued their currency. Also, the problems with postage due letters is that sometimes it's difficult to figure out what's going on. This is a 1908 double rate letter from Chile to Peru. So it's franked with 15 centavos, a 10 centavo and a 5 centavo stamped envelope, which was the proper franking. I think that's a misprint too. It was a proper franking for a letter weighing 20 grams. This letter must have weighed more than 20 grams. The next, under Chile's postal rate also, the UPU rate was 50 centimes, not 25 centimes. So this is so their conversion was 3.5 centimes per centavo. So it's marked with a single deficiency of 35 centimes because the next postage rate above 20 grams was 10 centavos for an additional 15 grams or 35 centimes. However, in 1908, the UPU had changed their regulations. You no longer marked single deficiencies. Now you should mark double deficiencies. Chile mismarked this cover with a 35. They should have put a 70 down. They didn't. So Peru assessed a penalty of 14 centavos at 2.5 centimes per centavo. So they assessed this correctly, even though the cover was marked incorrectly. Alternatively, you could say they realized it was marked incorrectly and charged it at at 14 centavos based on 5 centimes per centavo. We really don't know. Okay, foreign unpaid mail. When Peru joined the UPU, they set a penalty for completely unpaid foreign mail at 50 centimes, which is double the typical UPU rate for foreign mail, 25 centimes, plus the 25 centimes maritime surcharge without a penalty, plus the 5 centimes Panama transit fee without a penalty, a total of 80 centimes. This would reduce a penalty of 16 centavos at 5 centimes per centavo prior to 1896, and then 32 centavos at 2.5 centimes per centavo after 1896. There are very few surviving covers. This is one. This is a penalty envelope. Penalty envelopes were used by the US government. They were only valid for use in the United States or to United States possessions overseas. This was sent to Peru, to Lima, so it was an invalid usage. So this envelope is completely unpaid. And it's an 1890 usage. So Peru correctly assessed the 16 centavos with a 10, 5, and 1 centavo postage due stamp. There are only 2 covers that show this rate. There are also 2 covers that show a 20 centavo deficiency on an unpaid envelope. And I believe these were, it was just so much more convenient to put a 20 centavo stamp on it than buying 3 stamps that made up 16 centavos. So this was a matter of convenience to assess 20 centavos for this envelope. But then, after 1896, there were 2 envelopes, both from Germany, both completely unpaid, to Peru. And even though this is, in this case, they were assessed 32 centavos based on the correct conversion of 2.5 centimes per centavo. This may have something, both of these envelopes were eventually returned to Germany as unclaimed. They may have received higher scrutiny than the other short paid foreign mail in this period of time. And so maybe the office that actually held these covers and assessed the penalty probably was more knowledgeable about the correct assessment. So both of these covers were correctly assessed 32 centavos. Okay, domestic short paid mail. There are 71 surviving covers, or 16% of the census. This covers the entire period from 1874 to 1909. Peruvian regulations always required double deficiency during this period of time. So this is an 1878 cover from Juarez to Juarez, and it's correctly assessed a double deficiency of 20 centavos. But here's another cover. And I believe this is an 1870s cover too, 1876, 1878. And even though it has a 20 centavo penalty marking on it, it's only assessed 10 centavos. Because fully half the covers between 1878 and 1885 show evidence of only a single deficiency, half show evidence of a double deficiency. So it shows inconsistency with how to treat short paid mail within Peru during this period of time. This cover was 1890. It's a bisected cover. Evidently, the bisect was not approved, so it was treated as an unpaid cover and assessed 20 centavos double deficiency. And this is a cover from June of 1896 after Peru reduced its internal postage rate from 10 to 5 centavos. It's properly franked with 5 centavos, including a bisected 2 centavo stamp to make up the final penny. However, this cover was sent on June 13th, but on May 15th, 1896, these stamps were withdrawn from circulation. So this cover received a marking that said stamps retired from circulation, and there was assessed a double deficiency as a completely unpaid cover. The final category is used as postage. In Peru's regulations, if a post office ran out of definitive stamps for use in postage, they could use postage due stamps. And they require the postage due stamps to, generally they're applied to the front of the envelope in this case, not the back. They generally contain a statement saying Franca por falta de estampillas or Frank for lack of stamps. And they generally include required the signature of the postmaster below the statement. That was the typical procedure for using these stamps. And there are 90 surviving covers. This is actually one of the bigger usages of these stamps. And that does not include the 1 cent Franqueo overprints on the 1 cent postage due stamps. But in October of 1898, there was a general shortage of 5 centavo stamps. And so a decree was issued allowing the use of the 5 centavo deficit stamp as postage. They suspended the requirement that the postmaster add a statement or a signature, and they just used them. There were 15 covers from this, and this lasted until February of 1899, so about 3 months, 3 or 4 months. This is the latest cover from February of 1899. It's from Macasani to Lima, and there are 15 covers during this period of time that are franked like this. And then, of course, there are the Franqueo overprints. The 90 covers in this category do not include these types of covers. Almost all of these covers with this Franqueo overprint on the 1 centavo postage due stamp are from Williams and Company. And of course, since they were sent to stamp dealers, a lot of them have survived. This one is probably one of the ones with the entire postage made out of 22 1 centavo stamps. The entire postage rate of 22 centavos after 1896. And then we have the small Franqueo, the small Franco overprints. These are the covers that were supposedly given to Chilean troops that remained in Peru for 6 months following the conclusion of the war. Most of the covers are sent from Arequipa to Mollendo or vice versa. At the same time, in the first 6 months of 1884, Peru temporarily reduced its postage rates by 50%. Ostensibly, this was done to encourage business activity, to get the country back get the country's economy back to on a stable footing. So and since Mollendo and Arequipa are connected by rail, the postage rate for cities connected by rail was only 5 centavos prior to this, and when they reduced it 50%, it became 2.5 or 2 centavos. So there are a lot of bisected usages of the 5 centavo postage due stamp with the small Franqueo overprint. Let's see if you can see this. You can see the small Franca overprint right there. And once again, there are 11 surviving covers showing this usage of these stamps. And that concludes my presentation. So I may have gone too fast for some people. So if you have questions, I'd be happy to take them now.
Great presentation, Chuck. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any questions for Chuck? ¿Algunas preguntas por ahí?
How many years did you say that you have been collating this information?
I've been keeping the census for 15 years. I've been collecting this issue for 21 years, I think.
Wow. But the covers don't come up every day.
Well, like I say, there's only 449. I think I added 10 to 15 covers in the last year and a half to the census. So, but it's easy to find covers now because auction catalogs are so easy to search online to find things, even though I'm looking for mail sent to Peru as opposed to mail originating from Peru. So it's, it's much easier to find these things. We have access to the Philatelic Foundation certificates and the American Philatelic Society's expertising certificates. So those are sources of images too. I would like someday to go to the Royal and look through their 600,000 certificates and find, I'm sure there's some others in there that I haven't seen.
Thank you.
You might be wondering where I got the correspondence from.
Yes.
The correspondence, the Museum of American Finance in New York City has the order books from the national and American banknote companies, as well as some of the earlier correspondence from the 19th century. The American Philatelic Research Library in Bellefonte, Pennsylvania has the correspondence files from most of the 20th century, and there are gaps missing where some of it has just disappeared someplace.
Hey, Chuck, hey, great presentation. Do you have any postage due usages from Arequipa during the war with Chile?
I don't know. I'll have to search the census and send you. Now, offhand, I can't think of any. But I'll look, and if I find something, I'll send you the pages for that.
Just an additional question that during that time, especially when the Peruvian postal administration was under the Chilean administration, would it be the Chilean postage due that were applied, or the Peruvian ones were not used then, they were used in Arequipa and the free government, right?
Well, the only postage due issues during that period of time, I left this out of the presentation, would be the ones that were overprinted in Cusco, with the oval Cusco.
Oh, okay.
Postmark. Those are the only ones I know of offhand that were used during the War of the Pacific anywhere.
Have you seen those on cover?
Yes, there were 4 or 5 covers.
Oh, that's right. The one that has the overprint. Now I remember. Okay.
Yeah.
Ahí veo una mano en alto. Rolando, go ahead.
Buenas tardes para todos ahí los presentes. Dear Shock, sorry because my English is not the best, but this is my first congratulations for your exhibition. Today you have shown us incredible postcards that I have not seen before. Okay. You have one slide of these stamps with a triangle mark and Franca in text. Could you put it, please?
Exactly what is he asking for, Henry?
The Franca overprint, the small Franca overprint, the bisex. Rolando is asking for this cover. This is it, right?
Yes, this is the cover, but in the maybe in the first part of this presentation, you have this stamp, only the stamp with
Oh,
with
okay.
the mark.
The one after, yeah.
Whoops.
Yes, it's okay. I have a question because I knew that this overmark Franca, the A at the end of this word is not at the same level of the rest of the word. In this case, it's not evident this sign. You have any comment about it?
Well, I've been collecting images of stamps with this postmark, with this Franco marking on them. I've identified several forgeries um, and what I think are several legitimate cancels or legitimate markings. I haven't really done much with that other than I've thought about writing something up on it someday. I would like more images, high resolution images of these stamps. I've got resolution, I've got images of all the covers, but there are, dozens, at least dozens more stamps with this Franco marking on them. And I'd like to be able to identify which ones are forgeries and not. So if anyone has this stamp and they would like to send me some high resolution images of it, I would appreciate that. Does that make sense?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your response.
And I think I put this presentation together before I actually, I may have to go back and look at it. I'm not even absolutely certain this Franco is a legitimate Franco. Yeah, I think I put together my study of this overprint after I did this presentation. So on second thoughts, I might even want to go back and look at whether or not this is a legitimate Franco.
Yes, it's okay because your cover at the end of this presentation, maybe I could see that the Franca is according to my explanation about the A at the end of this mark. Maybe it's possible to compare this one when another moment, but it's only an observation. Thank you so much for your response, Chuck.
You're welcome.
Any other questions over there? ¿Alguna otra pregunta? I have one more question, Chuck, and this is related to the deficit overprint, the one you show us, the 1896, I guess, the letter sent by the Peru Post to the ABN with all four values, deficit value plus the 50 definitive with the deficit overprint. You mentioned that some were, well, the initial print was done with the Lecoq machine in Peru, and then they ratified that they wanted that printed by the ABN. How can you tell the difference between, in a single stamp, because probably in a block or in a larger piece, you can tell by the difference of the distance between the overprints and things like that. But in a single stamp, how can you tell the difference between the one made by ABM versus the one done with the Lecoq?
Well, this is a subject. This is a subject for for an additional investigation. You know, we have a specimen sheet that was produced by the American Banknote Company.
Uh-huh.
So I have a copy of the specimen sheet, so I know which ones came from the American Banknote Company with the deficit overprint. And then, of course, we have, on cover, we have covers dating from before 1907 with the use of this stamp. There was a few covers. So I know what a stamp produced by the Lecoq machine looks like and a stamp produced by the American Banknote Company looks like.
Mm.
And this is a photographic, I think they used a photographic technique to photograph the stamp and create this plate. The image on the 1907 stamps is slightly fuzzier. It's exactly the same size. You know, it matches up exactly, but it's fuzzier around the edges.
Okay. So magnifying the image, you can tell the difference.
If you magnify the image, you can tell the difference. I think. At least to me. And maybe it's wishful thinking, but I think you can tell the difference.
Yeah. Well, but maybe an 80.
It makes sense that the image would be distorted when they photographically reproduced it.
Yeah. Well, but at least maybe a good 80-20 rule, you know, there would still be some level of exception that could get that, because being a photographic has to be something very minor to determine which one is which. And another question, you also mentioned in 1866, there is a decree or a regulation that brings the penalty level to twice the deficit. I know
it says twice the normal postage.
Yes, twice the normal.
Twice something.
Right. This is a point in discussion in the sense of when was supposed to be double versus when was just the actual deficiency. Do you recall, or can you tell me where that decree exists? Because I thought it was a little earlier, but maybe it must be confusing.
It's in the 1866 reglamento.
Okay.
I don't know the article number right offhand.
Yeah.
But it's talking about the reuse of stamps. It's not talking about unpaid mail.
Okay.
And it's uses the word twice
for the reuse. Okay.
And which when you think about it, if it was an unpaid letter, it would be penalized. The penalty would be twice the normal postage.
Right.
But if you're going to have a separate penalty for reuse of stamps, twice or 4 times the normal postage makes sense.
Yeah.
This is the only example I showed that I've ever seen, because 2 years later they raised it to 10 times.
Right, it changed it. Now that's the interesting piece. I have some covers, and I know that others do as well, from the Castresana archive, that you can tell very clearly that the stamp used was actually a cutout from a previous cover, and it was pasted on top. And I have even 2 or 3 of those that you can tell that the paper from the previous cover is still there. Only one of them has been taxed. The other ones were just let go. They were undetected. So, but they are for sure 68 or 69. I need to take a look at that. I never really paid a lot of attention to it. That definitely a reuse.
Well, they would require some sort of hand stamp or pencil marking them.
Right.
For the penalty.
Right. Actually, during that time, some of the stamps were never canceled. So this is the case. The previous usage was not canceled. The stamp was left without any mark. So it was a cutout, including the backing from the previous wrapper. But anyway.
I'd like to see some examples of that.
Yeah, I have a few, and I know Aldo has a few too, because we got them from the same archive. I will send it over. I see another hand over there, Mauricio.
Okay. First, thank you, Chuck, for a very nice presentation. My question is regarding the material that exists with deficit stamps from Peru. From all the archives and covers that you have seen, how efficient, in your opinion, was the Peruvian system to detect a piece of mail that required a deficit stamp? Because I know that in some countries some countries had strict policies regarding deficit postage. Others were not as tight on that matter. So in your opinion, or in your experience, have you seen a large number or a small number of material that had to be taxed and wasn't?
No, I don't think so. Not after the introduction of postage due stamps. Prior to that, when foreign mail was assessed local postage, it's really hard to find markings indicating a tax on them. Should have been a pencil marking or something. I don't think there is, and that's the reason why the collection of penalties actually decreased over time. But after postage due stamps were introduced, I think they were pretty consistent. There are two big inconsistencies, though. One was early on, the first 7 or 8 years, they incorrectly assessed the deficiency on local mail, on short paid mail within Peru. And then after 1896, they incorrectly assessed the deficiency on short paid foreign mail coming into Peru. Once again, in both those instances, that's based on a survey of 15 or at most 20 covers. And certainly it's not a huge volume to make that observation, but it appears to be true.
Okay. Thank you.
This is Larry. I have another question.
Go ahead, Larry.
The Franca overprint, is that noted in many catalogs? I don't recall seeing that.
Well, I don't think it's in the Scott catalog.
Well, Bustamante, I don't recall seeing it there either.
Yes, he does.
It does, okay. Is it under regular issues? Or is it under multas? Because I was looking at multas just now and didn't see it.
Do you have the 1981 catalog? Because
I'm looking online.
Okay, it's on their website, and if you go there, I believe that one is under Arequipa and Departamentales.
Ah, okay. Muchas gracias.
De nada. Any other question over there? Chuck, one more question related to rarity. So you mentioned your census is definitely very thorough and you have covered everything under the sun, which is known about this. Of course, every now and then there is something new popping up. In your opinion,
there's a cover from Mexico in the Cornfilia auction next week.
Exactly, that's exactly, that's one of them.
And I asked them for a scan of the back of the cover. They haven't sent it to me.
I'm pretty sure they will. But in your opinion, what period is the most difficult for postage due in Peru?
Well, certainly the first 5 years, because there's a lot of foreign mail before Peru joined the UPU. That's the easiest period to find covers. After that, everything is pretty scarce.
Yeah. And in the beginning of the 20th century, those covers seems to be the rarest of all, right? Because there are some, but you can find more from the previous one than that particular time, at least in my experience.
One time I thought that was true. I thought there were very few covers with ungrilled stamps.
Uh-huh.
And that was only a 6-year period from 02 to 08.
Yeah.
1902 to 1908. But I believe there's probably 8 or 10 covers in that period, which is fairly consistent with previous periods.
Okay.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Al.
Hey, Chuck, great presentation. Really enjoyed it. How did you discover that the Lecoq machine was used for the 1896 issue when they put the deficit?
Well, if you go back and look at all the literature, and I went back to there's an 1890. Well, first of all, there are some postal. In the postal publications, there's a memoria in 1896 that when they used it for the Bermuda's overprints.
Okay.
It just talked about using it in that. And that's a contemporary official publication. There was also some in the bulletins. There's a couple of references. There's a 1898 catalog of Peruvian stamps that was published in an Argentinian postal journal in 1898, serially published over 6 months, and it talks about it. There are references in journals stamp journals from around the world talking about using the Lecoq machine. So there's a lot of references to the actual use of the machine. And in fact, the Bustamante catalog and the Mole catalog both used to say that they used the Lecoq machine to do these. And then Michael Dixon wrote a series of articles on the Lecoq machine. They were published in the London Philatelist, in Main Sheet, and in Philatelic Piranha, in the AFP publication. And he said it was doubtful they used the Lecoq machine because they overprinted so many of the stamps, the Bermuda's overprint, and they've overprinted 4 million stamps with that overprint. And he says that doesn't make any sense if they would have used the Lecoq machine. And again, we have full sheets of these stamps left in existence. So how could they have used the Lecoq machine on full sheets of stamps? Because they only had one printing mechanism. So what I did is I sat down and I measured the spacing on 2 different sheets between stamps. If they'd used a plate to do the overprint, then the spacing between adjacent stamps from the same position would be identical.
Right.
But they're not. They vary. They vary horizontally and vertically. They vary more horizontally than they do vertically. And I think the reason is that there was probably a line. They had a sheet, they had a plate that was flat enough to put the entire sheet on. They could move it underneath the printing mechanism. I suspected they had a line engraved or drawn on the plate, and so they could see the line through the perforations. So that helped them control the vertical spacing. But when they move a stamp from one position to another position, move the sheet over, the horizontal disc spacing varies.
Wow.
So I think that was the proof I needed, and that's true of both the deficit overprints on the 50 centavo and 1 sol high value definitive stamps, and the Bermuda's General Bermuda's overprints on the that was done the year before.
That's great research. Thanks for explaining that to me.
You didn't read my article, did you?
I did, but it's been a few years.
So anyway.
Thanks, Chuck.
So between the contemporary references and that sort of proof, I think, I'm pretty convinced that's what happened.
Excellent.
Now, the question is how. I know they used it. They use it on the deficit overprints, the General Bermuda's overprints. I'm sure they used it on the Telegraph overprints, and they did on the Franqueo overprints. There are some other overprints in 1902, and on the parcel post stamps.
Right.
It may have been done, but I don't know for sure.
Great research.
And Chuck, do you think those were also, that was also the case for the 10 soles overprint? Because they have like a number of varieties.
If you look at the 10 soles overprints, they don't have the same crispness of the deficit overprints.
Okay.
So it almost looks more like a hand stamp than a machine stamp.
That's true. The Telegraph one looks a lot like the deficit.
Yes, and so do the Franqueos. They're all very crisp because there's just one single die, and so the overprint comes out. It was applied by a machine, so the overprint is very solid. But the overprints on the on the high value definitive and postage due stamps and on the 20 centavo stamps looks cruder to me.
Good observation.
And of course, we don't have any official reference to those overprints because there are gaps in the bulletin, Correas and Telegrafos, and there's gaps in the that we have, and so there might be something in those that would actually say what they used, but since we don't have those pages, I can't find them.
Any other question over there?
I am interested in this Franco overprint on that postage due stamp. Was that meant to make this stamp okay to use for regular postage?
Well, as I understand it, there was, you mean the small Franco overprint
Yes,
in 1884?
yes.
Yeah, supposedly they were given to Chilean troops that remained in Peru for use only on local mail within Peru. I'm not sure that's absolutely true, but that's been the position ever since Angel Pupo put it in his book back in 1935.
Okay, thanks. No further questions for me. Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
I don't see any hands raised on the chat either, so I guess with that, Chuck.
If anybody has one that has a cover, if they'd send me a scan, I would appreciate it. I'd add it to the census.
Did you get the latest from Win? Win had one or two. I don't know. Maybe he sent you a copy already.
I don't know. I don't recall.
Okay, I'm going to remind him. Okay.
Okay.
Well,
thank you very much.
Chuck, thanks again. Fantastic presentation as usual. Y más tarde, tengo que decir el día de mañana, ¿sí?
Te pasé una foto de una marca de Franca que creo que Chuck no la ha visto.
¿Dónde está? Ah, ya la vi. Oh, Chuck, there is a question here. Let me share my screen. Javier Alegre posted this image. And he ¿Qué quieres saber de eso, Javier?
Sobre esa marca de Franca, que es distinta a las que hemos visto de
Oh, okay. He wants to know your opinion about this mark. Let me get there. Can you see it?
Sí, la marca de Franca que está en lila.
Yeah, he talks about the Franca under the postmark.
I've seen that mark before. I think I've seen this piece of paper before. Or I've seen a similar mark within the last 6 months. But I mean, that's the only other time I've seen it.
Okay. What would be your opinion of it? Who knows?
I don't know. It could be the postmaster in Mollendo did that on his own for a few stamps. It's hard to tell.
Okay.
I have a similar one.
Well, that's where I saw it then.
¿Agarraste eso, Javier? Javier?
That would be two if Javier has one.
Más de esa marca también.
¿Cómo?
Al creo que tenía más datos sobre esa marca de
Sí, Chuck dice de que recién ha visto esta. Quizás sea la misma y Al dice también que tiene una. No sé, Al, si quieres expandir algo más.
Sí, Javier, yo aquí estoy mirando mi colección. Yo tengo dos parecidas de Mollendo con la misma marca de Franca. Yo creo que no, tengo 3. Y uno está sobre 2 estampillas, un par, y las otras 2, como la estampilla tuya, sí, se usó por un tiempo creo que fue en 1904, 1905.
Sí, esta es la que está acá.
Pero sí, tengo 1, 2, 3, 4 ejemplares con ese mismo franca, y todos tienen el mismo mataseo de moyendo a varias fechas, 1904, 1905.
Por falta de estampillas, imagino que se utilizó el yeso.
Sí, no lo tengo en pieza, pero ahí está, la pieza tuya está firmada como debe ser.
Sí, sí. Debe ser por falta de estampillas comunes que se utilizó la pieza de déficit para el envío.
Exacto, debe ser.
Y-
Como dijo Chuck, seguro que fue aplicado ahí en moyendo.
Sí, sí.
Listo.
Gracias.
Ok. Con eso, a las 6 de la tarde.